Hello, welcome, and a very happy new year from The Season, the podcast from FYCit that goes behind the scenes of awards season. I'm your host, Ryland Aldrich, creator of the FYCit app. This week, I'm excited to share my conversation with awards events impresario and EVP at Shelter PR, Jerry Rojas. Jerry shares a ton of insights on the world of awards events and some secrets on how to throw a shindig worthy of winning the top prizes. Before we get to that, here's a quick look at the calendar for the week ahead. The day after this episode drops, Friday, January 3rd, we'll see the unveiling of the Set Decorators Society of America nominations. But that's just a prelude to Sunday, which brings us the first truly monumental award show of the season, the Golden Globes. The 82nd edition of the awards will see statues handed out in 15 film categories and 12 categories for TV. The awards air on CBS and Paramount Plus starting at 5 p.m. Pacific. The Globes are just the start of a busy week ahead. Monday brings nominations for Motion Picture Sound Editor's Golden Reel Awards and the ceremony for the Cinema Eye Honors Awards. Tuesday, we'll get the CAS Cinema Audio Society Awards nominations, the DGA noms for the TV and docs, and the NAACP Image Award nominations, followed by the National Board of Review's Awards Gala. Wednesday, we'll learn the film nominees for the DGA Awards, the SAG Award nominees, as well as get the nominations for the ICG Publicis Awards for film. And then Thursday brings us the Writers Guild Awards nominations, the Art Directors Guild nominations, and the ASC Awards nominations from our friends at the American Society of Cinematographers. Wow, we are truly in the thick of it now. It's been a relatively quiet period in screenings news over the holiday. Deadpool and Wolverine was the only film to see its first official FYC screening added. Holiday releases Nosferatu and A Complete Unknown saw the most screenings added with 7 and 6 respectively, and Nickel Boys also had 6 screenings added over the festive period. If you're an awards voter and not yet using FYCit, head over to FYCit.app to download the app for free and stay on top of all the latest FYC screenings. Now let's get to my conversation with Jerry Rojas. Today we're joined by Jerry Rojas, the Executive Vice President of Film and TV Awards and Events at Shelter PR. With over 20 years of experience in publicity awards and events, Jerry has shaped campaigns for acclaimed films like The Theory of Everything, Milk, Dallas Buyers Club, and American Fiction. At Shelter, he leads the agency's awards and events division, crafting strategies that combine standout events, tastemaker engagement, and targeted outreach to position projects for award success. We're thrilled to have Jerry with us today to share his insights on building effective campaigns, navigating the evolving landscape of award season, and what it takes to ensure a film captures the attention of both voters and audiences. So Jerry, how is your season?
My season is going very well. I am happy that it has been a very successful year for us, and I'm excited to see what's next.
So you've had an incredible career working on the client side of awards campaigns, leading Shelter PR's awards and events division. For those who might not be familiar with what that entails, can you walk us through the role that you play in awards season?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question because sometimes I don't even know exactly what I do. But I think I have found a very nice niche type of job. I touch a lot of different aspects of an awards campaign. I work on strategy for Oscar films. I also oversee and do strategy for Golden Globe campaigns. I work on tastemaker events and putting together very targeted events and screenings to get attention of people. When a studio approaches or any sort of client approaches, the first thing that I do is obviously take a look at the material that is being sent to me, the movie, the performance, whatever it might be, and give my honest feedback and recommendation on what I think really has a shot. And then we build a campaign around that. You know, sometimes I get approached to focus on custom design. Sometimes I get approached to just focus on acting. Sometimes is about Golden Globes. Sometimes they just want me to do events, tastemakers, premieres, and that sort of thing. So it really varies. That's what's exciting about my job. It's not just one thing. I get to touch many different aspects of what an awards campaign is.
So you mentioned tastemakers there. What's your definition of a tastemaker, and do you consider yourself one?
I do consider myself one.
What makes for a good tastemaker event?
I think a tastemaker is gathering of people that is small enough that allows the talent to have one-on-one conversations with people instead of a massive premiere. So it's about the size of the event and the opportunity that talent has to interact with the guest in a significant way. There's no formula for any of these things that we do. It's very specific to a project, but in general is inviting the people that will amplify those things that I see in the movie. So, for example, if we are doing a tastemaker for a custom designer, I would obviously emphasize on inviting people that understand that world and that will help amplify that message to that community.
How has social media changed the way that tastemakers operate and the way awards campaigns are run?
Well, it has changed the world, but when it comes specifically to campaigns, again, it really depends. It's a movie by movie. For instance, you have a movie like Challengers. Social media is huge because the appealing of that movie was not only to voters, but it was very like consumer. So, as a voter, when you are going through your Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, whatever it might be, once you see those sort of posts, it could generate interest on wanting to watch that movie. I also feel that when, you were asking me about tastemakers, the success of any event is on the mixing of groups. So always having a handful of influencers in a room full of voters with some press, that always generates the best kind of events.
Someone in your position obviously has to rely on a pretty extensive Rolodex of voters and influencers. What can you tell us about the makeup of a list like that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting process, actually. I always start with a 6 degrees of separation, which means I see who is in the movie and then start building the list from there. People that have worked with certain actors or certain directors or certain like hair and makeup people. And that's like the beginning of. And then from there, there's also research that you can do on X or Instagram and see who has used hashtags that have been championing that particular movie. You also do research on which press has been championing that film. It's a very interesting and fun process. We always start from scratch and try to curate the lists as best as possible for each of the different events that we get hired to do.
You say you're starting from scratch, but I would imagine there's a fair amount of overlap amongst guests that you've gotten to know over the years. How do you go about building that network and how has it evolved?
Yes, of course, there is a group of people that are very active in the awards community that like to attend. And I do have a list of the regular people that attend my events that I know that are loyal to me, that will show up, that, that I can count on them being there. So I have a curated list of the people that I always go out to first.
So what do you find is the most effective way to take those guests that come to an event and actually activate them into champions for a movie?
I think that the most important thing is that one-on-one conversation with an artist. And when I say artist, I'm not just talking about actors. It could be anyone in the movie. My job is to make those introductions and allow enough time to have a conversation. It's also the most challenging part of the job because you have everyone wants to talk to the same person or the same director or the same actor. So it's really about giving each person the best experience at those events and knowing your guests. So when I know that someone like an aisle seat or someone like has a hard time like going up the stairs or whatever it might be, is like when I know like all those details about my guest, I make sure that I accommodate them at these events because like I always tell people, your event starts with parking. So if you have a nightmare parking or using valet or any of these services, you're already walking into the screening with a bad experience. So it's really looking at the big picture and making sure that your guests feel well taken care of. I think that the success of an event is the transparency that you have with your guests, like for everyone to have the information that they need to know about it. When it comes to the logistics, it can be, making sure that you're starting your event at a time that it's convenient for people, that the location is easy to find, that there is like good parking, that you're giving your guests all the tools and all the information that they need to make a decision if they want to be part of it or not. Again, like making sure that if there's going to be anyone there that you need to make an introduction to, that the introductions are made. If there's any sort of like special circumstances or needs that a guest have, that those are being thought of and offered to people ahead of time. So it's not as easy as sometimes people think, oh, just do a screening and a little reception and it's, and that's it. There's like a lot of thought that goes into all of that.
So I've got a list here of some of the components that came to mind when I thought about putting together an event. And maybe we can take these one by one and dig into what kind of thought goes into that. So I'll just run through them really quick and then we can circle back. So I've got venue, the invite list, the talent that's going to be present, the Q&A or the moderator, the food and drink for the event. Anything I'm missing there?
Yes, the most important part. The tech check for the DCP, for the quality of the movie.
Oh, nice.
The most important thing is that the audio and the sound and the visuals are there. So you want to make sure that you are selecting venues. The movie is being shown the way that the filmmaking team wants the movie to be shown. There's a different kind of request that sometimes come from the filmmakers, like Dolby sound and this and that. Is very important that you take into consideration before you do that.
That's interesting because I would have guessed that venue is maybe more about the actual location. Is it in Beverly Hills? Is it, somewhere else? Or the event space for the party afterwards? Is it at someplace beautiful like the Ross House? But you're saying it actually starts with, will the movie play well in that room from a technical perspective?
Correct. And that's why there's a very handful of places in LA and in New York and in different countries that everyone wants, because that test has already been passed. You mentioned the Ross House. It's a beautiful place to throw any sort of event or screening, but at the same time, it's like one of the highest qualities, venues where you can see a movie. So that is why that's one of the hot spots to show movies in LA. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you can't show the product, the guests are not going to be able to appreciate it the right way. So for me, it always starts with the venue, the quality of sound and visual, and, then we take it from there.
Next on my list, I have the invite list and the needs of the guests. How important is that?
I worked at Focus Features for 10 years producing premieres. And that's the place that I learned that you really have to tune in into the specific needs for the wider crowds when you're inviting. Like, do the elevators work? Do they not work? Do you need any sort of equipment for people to feel more comfortable in the theater? There's like a lot of things that have to do with, the venues that you choose.
And I would assume that the size of the room also plays into what your invite list looks like. If you're in a 40 or 50 seat room, that's going to be very different than something in a 150 seat room.
Yes, I think capacity is very important. I am a big fan of rooms of under 75 people because I feel that those are the ones that you have the best opportunity to make the connections that you need to make. But understanding that sometimes time is limited and you have to appeal to wider audiences. It really all depends. Like, for instance, like sometimes we do events where there's only a Q&A. So if there's no reception and it's a big Q&A, then I want that screen room to be as large as possible. So as many people as possible can listen to what the artists have to say. But if I have an actor that is going to be doing 5 events in 1 week, then I rather do targeted and smaller events for that person to be able to have conversations instead of a larger one.
So let's talk about that talent and Q&A portion. There's some screenings that have, just the director or just an artisan. And then there's some that's like a focus on just one actor. But then there's also these screenings that have maybe the full cast and the director and the editor. How do you look at crafting the Q&A portion and the talent that'll be taking part?
It's a very interesting question because there's a lot of factors that make us determine what kind of Q&A to have. For example, if you only have the entire cast and the crafts team available 2 days, 3 days, or if you only have the option to screen the film once or twice, then you have no other option than to do a Q&A with as many people from the cast and the crafts team as possible. I personally love Q&As, like the smaller the better. I think that what you want out of a Q&A is to feel that you're having that one-on-one conversation with a handful of people. When you have a panel of 10, usually you only have the opportunity to ask one question to each, which is not enough for someone to get to know someone's craft or job. So yeah, so that's my answer. I think that it all depends on the circumstances, but I am a fan of tastemakers, I would say under 5 people.
So what about the moderator? What kind of role does choosing a moderator for that Q&A play?
The moderator is the leader of the Q&A, right? Like he can set the tone with the type of questions that that person is asking, feeling the vibe of the crowd. I think the moderator is a very important part of this scenario. I like to sometimes use press as my moderator because it could help amplify awareness from a press perspective. But I also am a big fan of a talent supporting talent. So a lot of times, one of the most successful Q&As is when you have an actor interviewing an actor or a director interviewing a director. I have seen pretty amazing conversations happen that way. So hopefully I get to do more than one event so we can just play around and have different sort or variety of different kind of panels.
Yeah, we had Delphine Figueres on the podcast earlier this season, and she talked about the conversations that she has had a lot of success with having a cinematographer interview a cinematographer, because then you get so much more in-depth conversation on the subject.
I love it. I think that having peers have a conversation about their craft is very special, especially if you're trying to target that audience. They talk a different kind of vocabulary when they are among their peers. So I always find those to be some of the best Q&As that I've been part of.
So that brings us to the everyone's favorite part of an event, which is the food and drink. What do you think about when it's time to plan out what it's going to look like as far as the spread after the Q&A?
So it's perhaps the least favorite part of an event for me. So luckily I have an amazing team that takes care of that part. But I would say it is an important part. When you're doing a reception, a party, or anything like that, it's obviously about music, food, and drinks to create an atmosphere. Sometimes we like to create a theme, and sometimes we like to enhance that experience with branding, having some fun branded, cups, napkins, and all that sort of things. It really all depends on project. Sometimes if a project is more fun and it's like a movie that is more commercial, you can get a little bit more creative and have different stations and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when it's something more formal, you just want to be like very straightforward and not necessarily make the food the focus of the reception.
So obviously this is a business that's all about who you know and relies on making good impressions at the right time. It seems like this is definitely one of your superpowers. So what's your secret to being such a good schmoozer?
I don't know. You will have to ask them. You would need to ask other people. I think that I'm just very honest. I'm a very open person. If someone asks me a question, I just tell them what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. I take the time to know people. It's not, like in LA, it's very much like, oh, let's do lunch next week. Oh, yeah, let's do lunch. And then it never happens. Like I think that I hardly cancel when I commit to have a meeting with someone. It's really about, I do take the time to get to know people. And when I connect with someone, they typically stay in my life for a very long time.
Do you ever worry about bringing too many projects to your list or sort of championing too many projects? Do you have to be selective?
I worry about it every day. And yes, you have to be very selective. From what I have learned is being selective is being respectful to your client, the people that have put their trust in you, that you are going to deliver something. And when you spread yourself too thin, there's just no way to do it. So yes, I am very selective. I am a big fan of quality versus quantity. And I am also a big fan of working on projects that you really feel passionate for.
So, speaking of quality versus quantity, when it comes to the guests that attend these events, how do you avoid certain less desirable voters from attending your events?
The way that I have handled that is you can't avoid it. So you just learn how to handle them. If there are people that you feel maybe are inappropriate in some aspect, then you address it and you just have a conversation with them. And honestly, a lot of times it goes far just to say, please don't do this or please don't do that. I really have a hard time lately with like the whole selfie thing. It seems that, I totally understand the fascination of taking photos with someone that you admire. But, sometimes I do tell people like, hey, we're here to have a conversation. Let's just have a chat. And, if a photo happens organically, great, but that should not be the main focus of a conversation.
Have you seen that really increase in just the last few years where pretty much everyone wants a photo? Or how have you seen selfie culture at events evolve?
I think that the better that the iPhone cameras have gotten, the more people that want a selfie. So yeah, I have noticed an increase. Yes, I understand it, and it's great to be able to. I love photos, so I have over 40,000 photos in my phone. So I'm one of those, but that loves to take photos. But I just think that there's a place and a time for everything, and if you are at a particular event to have a meaningful conversation with someone, that you should actually value and appreciate those minutes to have that conversation instead of wasting your time on a photo, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. So switching gears a little bit, we just had Hollywood Reporters Awards Oracle Scott Feinberg on the show, and we were discussing how an increasingly international and younger voting body have changed campaigning. Have you seen these or other changes, and how do they affect your approach in any specific ways?
So the answer is like absolutely yes. The international vote is extremely important. And I have actually seen how it can make a difference. I can give you a very specific example. This year, I took it upon myself to travel to different parts of the world. I went to Cannes, I went to Venice. I did trips to Mexico, Amsterdam, Berlin, et cetera, et cetera. I was just looking to meet new people, having connections with people. And it was fascinating to see their love for cinema, and they don't necessarily have access to a lot of things that we have access. So I feel that when you are in these countries overseas and you're talking to people, it's truly, truly about the film only, because that's the only thing that they really have. They have a screening, but sometimes they don't even have a Q&A. I do think that international is very, very important right now. It has been the latest task from the Academy to expand the membership into the international countries. So a lot of those folks are very active. So, like the people that have been part of the Academy for the last, 5 years, they're very active. They want to attend the screenings, the Q&As, they want to participate, they travel to festivals and all that sort of thing. So it's a very important active group that it's part of the Academy now.
So one thing that you're particularly well known for is your outreach to Golden Globes voters. Obviously, we've seen a lot of changes in the Golden Globes voting body. Can you talk about how Golden Globes have changed and how campaigning for the Globes is different than campaigning for Oscars?
Sure. I guess the biggest difference is that we went from approximately 80 voters to over 300 all over the world.
This is for the Globes.
Yes. Over 80 countries are represented, and it's perhaps one of the most diverse groups in our industry when it comes to culture and race, and it's fully on diverse in so many different ways. It's a different approach because these are journalists. Targeting journalists is not the same thing as targeting someone that does hair and makeup, for instance. So I think that I've seen a huge change. I have met many, many of them, especially internationally. And I also can tell you that I have done a lot of pairing of interviews with contenders, with new journalists. And I would say I have received the best feedback from directors and actors regarding those interviews with a Golden Globe journalist more than ever. Like they finished a press day or a set of interviews and they always afterwards tell me those were one of the most thoughtful questions that I have received this season. So yeah, I think that, kudos to them for adding the new body of journalists internationally.
Any examples of how targeting journalists as voters is different than targeting, say, like a craft guild?
When you read the Golden Globe rules are very clear. The people that are part of the Golden Globes are journalists. Therefore, you can offer opportunities for interviews, press, anything that you would do for any press around the world, you can offer to them. So that is like one way in where you cultivate those relationships is just by offering and treating them the same way that you would treat any member of the press. And then as a voter, anytime that you are targeting them from an FYC perspective, you have to just follow some pretty basic rules. So it's a little bit different because a lot of times I could be going to someone as a journalist and not necessarily as a voter, especially on months where there's no voting to do. So, if I am opening a movie in February or in March, I would still go out to press, regardless if they vote or don't vote.
So bringing it back to events, I'm curious what you think the overall effect of events are on a film's chances to win.
Well, I think that we all have to agree that the most important thing is you need to have a good movie. You need to have a good project. Quality of a film will always surface to the top, no matter what other strategy you can or cannot do. But the events are a very important part of the overall strategy because it gives that human one-on-one connection. And there's also nothing like watching a movie in a room full of people. So it gives you that opportunity to just feel and express yourself with an audience and hear reactions and have a conversation with other people after, even if it's just in the theater. So I do think that events are very important because they give us that opportunity.
So beyond actually winning awards, are there other ways that you measure the success of an awards campaign? Are there other, metrics or goals that studios and filmmakers value?
Yes. When I have the opportunity to work one-on-one with filmmakers or actors, sometimes their goals are very different than a studio goal. For example, an actor that maybe produced a movie, their goal is just for the movie to be seen, for the movie to be appreciated by audiences. They're not necessarily doing this for an award. They're doing it because they were very passionate about telling that story. And it shows when someone has a very specific focus on the reasons why they're doing something.
You've worked on so many awards campaigns. We mentioned a few at the top of the show. Are there any particular, maybe one campaign that stands out as a personal career highlight or something that you think back on as just a huge success?
There are a handful, but I would say The Theory of Everything with Eddie Redmayne was a very critical campaign for me to work on. I was very involved in the day-to-day strategy that went into that campaign and also did a lot of, screenings and Q&As and events and that sort of thing. So that was like a very special moment in my career because I had the opportunity to really feel that I was a critical part of the movement.
Yeah, wonderful movie. Well, Jerry, we like to end all of our interviews with a lightning round of questions. So these are just quick questions, quick answers. So what's your favorite award show to attend?
The Golden Globes, because I love the table seating and how everyone is very relaxed and it just feels like, a dinner party.
What's your favorite film festival to attend?
Telluride. I do nothing else but to watch movies all day.
Yeah.
And I think it's the only festival that I feel I can do that.
Do you prefer Emmy season or Oscar season?
Oscar season.
Do you have a least favorite award speech cliche?
Something that I would love is for people to not read so much when they're when they're accepting, because you only get to see their head. And I'm like, just maybe it's okay to be emotional and just, say whatever you're feeling in that moment.
Speaking of emotional, would you be more likely to cry or swear during an acceptance speech?
So I cry like all the time.
Do you prefer to watch FYC screenings at home or in the theater?
Whoa, that's a really good question. I prefer to watch them at home, but I know it's important to watch them in theaters. I have a very comfortable mattress.
What is your favorite past app at a screening reception?
Sliders.
All right. Final question. What is one early awards season prediction that you're willing to make?
Demi Moore, Best Actress.
Wonderful, Jerry. Thank you so much for joining us on the season.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
We're back, and I'm here with our FYCit field agent, Tony MIros. Tony is joining us from the festive New York, finding all the best screening rooms to watch the season's contenders, as well as the best snacks to munch on while doing so. Tony, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Ryland. How you doing?
Doing well. It was a great festive period over here. How about for you?
Oh, it doesn't stop. Lots of fun, lots of things to do, places to go. That's me running around.
So running around to all these screening rooms, where'd you get to this last week?
Yeah, I got to see some really cool screening rooms this time. I went to the Universal screening room on 54th and Avenue of the Americas. It seems like all these like big ones, like the ones for Paramount and Universal, they're all in like high rises, like these giant, huge buildings. And you're like, where is it? And you have to go down a little hallway, and there it is. Anyway, so I went to Universal screening room to go see Nosferatu, which I remember I told you last time, I was like, I'm really not good with scary movies. I'm not good with scary movies at all. But because I had seen Dracula like so many times, this did not affect me that badly. Wow. Honestly. Yeah, because, it's the story of Dracula. But it was beautiful. I thought the cinematography was gorgeous, and the score and the production. That's what everybody kept saying after the film. Did you see it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was a big fan.
Did
especially
it scare
you? I'm not super affected by scary movies, but I thought that it was really, really effectively done. And especially just the crafts, all of the crafts in that film are just so remarkable.
Absolutely. It was creepy. I'll give it that. It was creepy lighting, creepy specs. Everything was creepy.
People love scary movies.
I guess. So then I went over to the Paramount screening room, which was really awesome. It's on Broadway. It's the old Viacom building, if you've ever been to New York and Viacom. So it's now Paramount because they swallowed them up. And it's a really cool screening room. You go to the third floor, and it's a whole reception area is gorgeous. And they have all the walls have the movie stars from the Paramount films. And the bench from, what's that Tom Hanks film? Forrest Gump is in the lobby. And you're like, oh, look, it's the bench from Forrest Gump. So anyway, I went to go see September 5. Yes, that's what it's called. Not September 5th, September 5. And I got that from the horse's mouth. So September 5, produced by Sean Penn. And it's about the Munich thing at the Olympics, where the Israeli Olympic team were killed, basically. And how the ABC anchors who were there covering the Olympics had to automatically go into like the news mode. And it was very interesting because Peter Sarsgaard, who is the star of the film, he did a Q&A afterwards. And that's where I found out that it's September 5, not September 5th. He talked about how the director wanted total realism for the set, for the props, for everything from the 1970s. They actually did a lot of research to make sure that the facility that they used for ABC Sports looked exactly like it did back in the 70s. And it really comes through because what they did was they actually used footage that they had used on the air from anchors Jim McKay and Peter Jennings. They used archival footage in the film. So the actors are talking to them through the mics, like as if they're in the control room, and they're answering them. But it's real footage from what happened back then. So it's fascinating. It was a very well-made film. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. It's very powerful. Interesting about how history is made in the weirdest ways and where it all comes from, because that's basically where it came from. Anyway, I thought it was fantastic. And the screening room was perfect. Loved it. Loved Paramount screening room.
So I want to ask about these studio screening rooms in New York. You said you went to Universal. This was at Paramount. Have you been to the Warner Brothers screening room yet that's in Hudson Yards?
I have not. I've not been to that one.
I'm curious because, you go to a screening room on a lot in Los Angeles, and you are absolutely in the middle of, a studio lot. You see sound stages and props and all of the,
it's very Hollywood, yeah.
Scripts and electric and everything like that. But when you're at these studio screening rooms in New York, I assume none of that, right? It's just a very corporate sort of room
It's corporate,
or building.
But they bring in some elements to make you feel that. Like when you arrive into the third floor of Paramount, screening room, all the walls are covered in Elizabeth Taylor and, The Godfather. And so they try to emanate that, like you are at Paramount, like it's an extension of the studio. They even have an old emblem from the studio in Paramount on the wall so that it looks also brass. They try to bring it there. But again, you're in a building in New York City. So there's not much they can do to catapult you to a studio, but they try to put in elements to make you feel that way. I didn't feel that at Universal at all. Universal was completely corporate. So I didn't.
So maybe a little bit like the Netflix screening rooms in LA where you kind of go into their office building and if they got like some good decor, but you feel like you're in an office building.
Right, exactly. Talking about screening rooms, I went to the Dolby 88 screening room for 2 screenings, not back to back, but on different days. That's on 55th and Avenue of the Americas. Again, very corporate, but when you walk in, of course, it has all the Dolby stuff and it's a state-of-the-art sound and imaging. It's beautiful. And the way they make it, you feel like, this is a Dolby screening room. But again, it's very corporate. It's in the back. You have to enter through the front. There's a doorman who lets you in, and then you have to go down a little hallway, and there it is, Dolby screening room. You're like, this is where it is, out of the blue. So it's interesting. But I went to go see Maria with Angelina Jolie. I was really surprised with it, and I really enjoyed that film. The other film I saw at Dolby 88 was Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which is a documentary about, of course, actor Christopher Reeve, his horseback riding accident, which left him paralyzed, and then working as an activist for disability rights. I'm a huge fan of the Superman films that he made. Those are the ones that I grew up in. So to me, there was a lot of emotion involved because I remember seeing him on the big screen, and I remember when this accident happened, and then to hear his children talk about him and see home movies. I didn't know he was really good friends with Robin Williams. I had no idea. But it was so interesting how they had such a great dynamic. They were so opposite and so different. I got so much information from this film, and my mother went with me, actually, and we both really enjoyed it. And it's so sad because, he passes away, but then his wife, 6 months later, passes away and leave their son, their 13-year-old son, an orphan. But again, fantastic. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So 2 good films at the Dolby 88.
Yeah, sad story. Also sad that film was left off of the documentary shortlist for the Oscars. So it's a good thing you caught one while they were still screening that.
Well, that's a shame. I'm poo-poo on the Academy.
That's a whole nother conversation to have about the documentary branch. But what do you got coming up?
Well, I've got The Fire Inside, which I'm hearing a lot of good buzz about. Blink Twice, which I never saw or heard anything. I know it came out a while ago, and so now I'm going to see it. And Challengers is on my list of things to do.
So do you find that most of these screenings, it sounds like all 4 of the ones you went to were just straight FYC screenings, no, maybe you said September 5 had a Q&A, but mostly these are just go and watch the movie and leave, no receptions or anything like that. Does it feel like there's more of that in New York, or is that just a function of how your schedule has come together?
It's funny because I do specifically look to see if there's a Q&A, and if I can make it, I do go to those. But again, a lot of them are just going to the screening room, look at the movie, and then leave. So not a lot of that. I try my best because I do want to hear what happens, right? I do want to hear the inside track. Listen, Peter Sarsgaard was so open and honest about the film September 5. I actually had to take a picture with him afterwards because I really was impressed with his performance. But again, I'm trying my hard. But New York is not like LA. It's a totally different kind of feel here. People go in, they see the film, they applaud, and they leave.
Well, there can't be a whole lot of films left on your list to see this year, right?
I know. I got to make a list, Ryland. I got to make a list.
Oh, well. Have you tried using the favorite feature in the app? If you go into the FYCit app, you can just click the little star on all the films you still need to see, and then you can sort the list by that and just see the favorites.
Oh, I have to do that. Yeah, because, sometimes some of them are not even out anymore, I think. So I'd have to go see. Because they're not doing anything for, what's his name?
The Brutalist.
The Brutalist. They're not doing any of those, are they?
Still waiting for some of the All Guild FYC screenings to pop up for The Brutalist. Yeah.
See, so that's one of my, and if I don't get to see a screening of it, I'm going to have to go to a movie theater.
Thank you so much to Tony MIros, our FYCit field agent, and another thanks to Jerry Rojas for all the insights. We'd love to hear what you think of the season. You can leave us a review on your podcast app or drop us a line at podcast@fycit.app. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell a friend. And don't forget to follow us on social media at FYCit app. You can also visit FYCit.app to sign up for our newsletter, download the FYCit app, and stay up to date on everything happening this award season. Join us again next week for another episode of The Season as we dive deeper into the stories behind the awards. Until then, remember, at FYCit, award season starts here.